starting from scratch is not a scary thing. It's an exciting thing. Don't view it as a negative thing. The more you view things negatively, the harder it's going to be. And I think the second part is gratitude, and not the gratitude that's based on pride. Because a lot of people, I would get this in my chair where people would look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, my life could be so horrible. I could be like you in a wheelchair. And it's like, okay, so my challenge, to challenge somebody listening to this, it'd be, so if that happens to you, how are you going to be grateful?
Hey guys, welcome to Millionaire Brand Creation. I'm your host, Michael Banovac. I'm super excited to have my friend on, Melody Nosworthy. She has a very interesting story because she's graduated from college with multiple degrees, advanced degrees. She's a print model, as well as, I would assume you've done some runway as well, but you had a traumatic brain injury several years back that you had to go through, and now you're training to compete in Ironman Arizona, Ironman Florida, and you're really starting to help a lot of people through your organization. So without further ado, Melody, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great. Hey, I really appreciate you coming on. And if you can, take us back to when you were a kid and the thought processes you had to become a model before we actually get into your traumatic event.
Well, with modeling, it wasn't something that I thought I would ever do. I was a trainer in college, and my mom brought me an article. It was for auditioning for print work. So that was doing things like Charming Charlie's, PF Chang's. And the day of the audition, I had to teach like 5 boot camp classes back to back. So when I showed up to audition, I was in like a tank and shorts. My hair was completely drenched from teaching cycling classes. And I'm looking around, and there's all of these girls with like high heels on and mini skirts and like makeup, like dressed up to the nines. And I'm like, I feel so out of place right now. But I made really good friends with the photographer, and I looked at her. I said, I'm really sorry. I just came from work. I've never modeled before. And she's like, we actually prefer you without makeup on because we can see what we're working with. She was just so calming, so fun, and ended up, winning that competition. Basically, I got work from that. She would send me, hey, we're casting for this, we're casting for PetSmart. And so I would just balance that with my school schedule. It wasn't something that I thought to myself one day, I'm just going to be a model. It just kind of landed in my lap.
And then obviously that all changed. I mean, tell us about your event. Tell us about your work and your passions and things of that nature.
My undergrad's in pre-med. I graduated in 2012. That was when Obamacare came out. I was strongly discouraged to wait to go to medical school. So I went into business, started an insurance business, was miserable because all I was ever doing was working and making money, and didn't really have much time to exercise, which I really need to do to feel like normal. And decided that I wanted to leave that and make a difference. So left that and went and worked at a university, got my master's degree, got to work with, university students, which is something I really enjoy. And the last class before my master's was over, I had my accident. So that kind of paused me from being able to finish. And the last 6 years has been basically learning how to do things that just come naturally to other people, walking, standing, getting my heart to, rise when I exercise, things like that.
I mean, obviously, I think the listeners are interested in knowing. So you're everything's on track, everything is going well, and then this happens to you. No one knows how it happened, really, right? No one knows why it happened, but it happened. What was going through your mind at that time, and kind of explain that experience and the feeling? Because I think we take a lot of that for granted.
The thing is you don't really have memory leading up to your accident. Your actual accident or the period after is really spotty. So I've been told that I didn't know who my mom was for a long period of time. I've always had a really good memory. I can remember where things are at. So when I couldn't remember where I left my phone and I was holding it in my hand, I'm like, okay, this is like what other people do. Like, welcome to the real world, Melody. But when it comes to the emotions of going through that, obviously you have a lot of frustrations, and it's part of being human. And I think that if I could share anything, it would be those emotions are going to be a part of life. And so you can run from those things, or you can really use it to fuel you, empower you through stuff. So when you have a really hard day at therapy and you go in thinking that you're going to nail that, that goal, you might not nail it. So if you go in with that expectation of, I'm going to nail this today, or it's going to be the worst day ever, you're going to have, it's going to wipe the floor with you. So you have to just have the mentality that I'm always working for something that's going to push me to a better future. And that's 1% better daily. So sometimes you'll go, I think I went 2 years before I started standing.
Wow.
And everyone's like, it was like you started walking overnight, but it wasn't overnight. And I think that a lot of people, they think that when they start putting in effort, that it's just going to happen for them. And you have to be willing to put in effort, knowing that you may not ever get that result right away, but you have to show up anyway. And with the days feeling sorry for myself, where I was like, this sucks. Like, I'm in a wheelchair. You know, your own hell is waking up one day in a life that you didn't want. And then you're like, what can I do to get out of this? Well, I can't do anything to get out of this. I just have to learn to be happy with it. And I was probably more resistant than most because I was so active before my accident. Also, that stubbornness did pay off for me in the long run. I was just taking it day by day, doing 1% better will add up over time. The small things mean more than you'll ever realize when it comes to recovery. I mean, eating well. People are like, "Oh, you could have a donut today." I'm like, "No, I'm eating blueberries and walnuts right now. Like, I'm not anything bad because I don't want to jeopardize my recovery." And so it literally became just anything that I could possibly do to get better. That was it, and anything that wasn't it was a hard no. So yeah, a lot of sacrifices, a lot of time, a lot of crying, but at the end of the day, you have to realize you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And so even if you don't like to feel positive in that moment, you have to choose to be positive, because otherwise it's just going to be the same story every day, waking up, feeling sorry for yourself. And it's just a cycle. And you have to, at some point, say to yourself, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of this chair. And my doctors are all telling me, no, it's not going to happen. You're going to feel really bad some days, and you just have to work through it and just keep moving forward. And eventually you'll get there if you keep showing up.
So what was the change? So obviously doing 1% better every single day. How long did it take you before you came back to normal, let's say, or what normal, function was before? Can you describe that a little bit?
You go through the shock of what happened. And so you have to kind of accept the reality of where you're at. For me, it took a while for me to accept that I'm not who I was before, and my heart does not function the way that it used to. Things aren't as they were before. And it sounds really silly, but you've always known that, I can run, a 5:30 mile. Well, I can't even stand up out of my wheelchair. So it's this, confusing. It's a process, and you grieve it. You have to process, what happened to you. You have to process the frustrations of today, and then the uncertainty of tomorrow, because you don't really know how you're going to move on with life in a power chair. Right. Never had to ever think about that before. Never thought it would ever happen to me. There was just one moment that I just was tired of feeling like a victim. And I'm like, I am tired of feeling like a victim. I'm tired of everything that's happened. I started doing everything that I could to get better. But you have to let yourself grieve. If you don't have that emotional grief process, I mean, I don't know how you could get through anything as heavy as this was without letting yourself grieve and giving yourself days to have bad days. I mean, I have bad days now where I'll, go to do something and I'm like, man, today really sucked, but I'm not going to let, what happened today get into my tomorrow. So if I showed up to, training and I didn't have the best day, well, tomorrow I'm going to have better days. I just learned to keep each day separate and live in the present. I noticed that whenever I am living in the past of what happened to me, I get kind of sad and depressed about it. But when I'm in the present moment of I'm walking and I'm running and I placed third in my first 5K when they told me that was never possible, the best thing I think that I ever could have done for myself was doing that race, because I had doctors who were specialists telling me it would be possible. And I believed the things that people said to me. And it was like I was proving to myself that I could. And so now the sky's the limit with me. So I'm even thinking I think I could actually place in an Ironman someday. And I know that I've had people say, oh, that's not possible. Well, you've told me that walking was possible. Yeah, here I am. Have your direction, but know that, if you want to become somebody, you have to learn how to become that person. You're not just going to jump into being an Ironman athlete. You have to do the small steps. And I think people think that they have to have it figured out right away, but you become that person along the way and you learn along the way. The one thing I actually learned that I really value, if I could share it with anyone, would be you will learn how to become that person. Just start showing up.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people, I think, listening to this podcast are obviously they tune in for business, right? But I think there's a lot of parallelisms between business and life, right? Failure and getting back up and trying again. And I think your story resonates with the audience because, people have failed in their businesses. They've lost money. They've lost their job. They have failed in their personal lives and relationships. And if you could give the audience, a piece of advice or something that got you through, what would that be? Because obviously one day you're doing this, the next day, boom, you wake up, it's totally a different life. And now you're spending the next 6, 7 years of your life getting back to where you were and surpassing it. What are some tips and some tricks you can share with the audience?
It's not all over. Like, I don't hear a fat lady singing anywhere. Like, there's still
Yeah.
time on the clock. And the thing is that you're not starting, it may feel like a hurricane hit your life and you have all of this stuff to clean up, but you have this excitement of building something completely new. So right now it's like, I'm going back to school. Never even thought about going back to school at this part of my life. And I would have probably never left higher education at that point. The things that happen to you, you can let them make you bitter or better. And really, character development is the most important thing you will ever work on in yourself. And that will apply to every area of your life. Because I've been able to accomplish the things, personally with my health, I've just gone after the goals I've had in business where it's like, okay, like I'm going to figure this out, which before I probably would have been a little more timid and doubted myself and my abilities. Starting from scratch is not a scary thing. It's an exciting thing. Don't view it as a negative thing. The more you view things negatively, the harder it's going to be. And I think the second part is gratitude, and not the gratitude that's based on pride. Because a lot of people, I would get this in my chair where people would look at me and they're like, oh my gosh, my life could be so horrible. I could be like you in a wheelchair. And it's like, okay, so my challenge, to challenge somebody listening to this, it'd be, so if that happens to you, how are you going to be grateful? And the way that I've shared it with my friends is like, God gives you $1 and you have $1 in your hand, and you take that dollar and you put it out into the world and you add value to the world and you multiply that. And you can do that in business. I mean, that's the really cool thing about business is that you do get to share your talents with the world. You get to, do things that other people probably wouldn't think that you would be able to do. It's the beautiful country we live in, But when it gets kind of dangerous is when you look at your neighbor to the right and they have $2 and you're like, well, why don't I have $2? And so in that moment, you feel like you're less than. And so if you're always looking and comparing yourself to somebody who has less, it's pride based, and pride is not sustainable. It's only going to lead you always comparing yourself to other people. And in that moment, you actually lose who you truly are and what makes you unique. When you lose that, I mean, what's the point of living? This is your life. You only get one life. And I've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse. So you have to kind of live to the best of your ability and be happy with what you're doing. Make the most of what you have, because life is so fragile and we don't really have as much time as we think we do.
Yeah, comparison's the ultimate thief of joy, right? And so when you're in that situation, you got to do what you can to survive and thrive and uplift others. But here's another question for you. Who is one of your biggest mentors in your life? What did they teach you? And why were they important to you?
So I have 3 mentors, one for my professional life and one for my personal life, and then one for, to train me how to be like a good wife for my future husband. I have 3 mentors. My life mentor really is somebody that, she's a little bit older than me. She's very successful in what she does. And mainly she keeps me accountable and keeps me in check. But the most important thing for me has been to give myself grace. I'm really, hard on myself. I'm always trying to reach towards the next goal. And I don't really stop to smell the roses often in my life. You would think as a coach, like push, 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 but if you can't enjoy life along the way, like you're not going to be able to have the energy to sustain you to keep going towards that goal. Like you have to celebrate small victories. You have to celebrate the mini victories, as small and as silly as they are, because when you do get to a really hard time, you have to have a little bit of momentum going into it. And then if you reflect back to the good times, like when I was in my chair, I remember the moments that like I graduated. I remember the moments that I, got an award at work, and I would have to use that to say, like, I'm going to get somewhere in the future. Being able to not live in the past, but remember that, you do have a reason to live. You have a reason to keep moving forward, and you do add value to the world that's going to help get you through the really dark times.
So that was your one mentor. What did your other 2 teach you?
I'm a really independent person. So my mentor for like my relationship life, has been, I've always been really independent, always really never needed anybody. So letting somebody like provide for me and help me with things is a really difficult task for me. It's kind of funny, but like we met up and she's like, okay, you're going to let me open the door for you every single time like we go out today. And it's just, I normally let like people open the door for me, but are you doing what you need to do in the role of a female? And it's just funny because I don't even think about those things. So she's basically like whipped me into shape in that regard. And then, professionally, probably to keep showing up and to never give up. I mean, that's probably, overlying theme of our relationship has been take it day by day. That was one of the things when I started to get really overwhelmed after my accident. I called her. I'm like, I don't think I can make it through this right now. Like, this is just, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. Like, I'm stuck. Everyone's telling me no. And she's like, just do today. And if you can't do today, just take the next 5 minutes and take the next hour. And if you have to, take it hour by hour, but break it down. And one of the things that she said was, how do you eat an elephant? And I'm like, one bite at a time. Got it. Okay. So that's, the best advice she gave me.
And all three of them were female, correct?
Yes.
That's interesting. They're all very important aspects of life, right? Your personal life, your business life, your mental life, right? All those concepts are important and make you who you are. If you move forward in that, what are some books that you've read that you would recommend to the audience that helped you in your journey?
I really like the book Atomic Habits. I know you probably have heard this before.
Yep.
It's so important because a habit, is people think that good habits are hard to form, but good habits and bad habits, you can form or break either of those. And I think that when it comes to trying to move yourself in a good direction, learning how to establish good habits, how your brain works with that, understanding how the brain works is really important too. So any type of books on psychology, neuroplasticity, how your brain needs to be positive. I think Atomic Habits goes into it, but not into like the crazy science version that people probably want to read on. And I really liked the book Trust by Dr. Henry Cloud. Trust in, your professional life and relationships, how to give trust, how to see if someone deserves trust. Really did enjoy that book. And of course, I mean, you've probably heard this, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from that one book. Ben Franklin, there's a quote in that book that said, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. I just have learned, like, somebody wants to tell me the sky's yellow. I read the situation. They're probably not going to appreciate me telling them the sky is blue. So I'm just going to let it go. And I think that's probably been the best advice I've ever gotten from a book.
Well, and it's Henry Ford's big quote, right? If you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So
Yeah.
you got to make sure that you are inputting positive thoughts into your mind at all times. And I think the thing that interests me the most about your story is you have everything going for you, then it's all taken away, and then you work your way back, right? I think part of the human journey is the fall and the comeback. And if you can, like, describe the mind and how it shifted during that time, because I think what's really impactful about your story is not just like your personal transformation through your body, but how did you control your mind? That's what I think is so interesting.
Knowing before you get into something how you're going to handle it is going to make that whole process so much easier. So that would be like now today saying, if something ever happened to me, I have, four responses I can take. And then you have to eliminate one of those responses. So the first one would be to give up. The one would be to rest, keep going, go faster, slow down. I mean, you have different options to take. And if you look at your life, you take an option every day. So one day you may feel really tired and you're like, okay, I feel like quitting, but I can't quit. So you have to eliminate quitting. You have to eliminate it as an option. Otherwise, you'll take it when you get tired every time and you won't make it. Go to the next option. Okay, I know I can't quit, so maybe I'll rest today instead, but I'm not going to give up. Or maybe instead of going, trying to run a 5-minute mile, maybe I'll run a 12-minute mile today. You're still moving faster than if you were to quit. And it's really, you play those 5 options in your life, just eliminate one. You have 4 other ones to choose from. So you can focus on the fact that, oh, I don't want to do this. And usually what makes the difference between people who get out of their chairs and people who stay, or I mean any goal, is when there's a moment where you quit or there's a moment you keep going. And the people who make it are the people who are like, I feel like quitting, but I know I can't quit. I've come too far. I can't quit. And they eliminate quitting as an option. And I really do believe that I just never allowed myself to just fail and quit. So I could have gone to therapy, blacked out, but I knew the following day I'd show up again, show up. And I had this phrase, when I got diagnosed with dysautonomia, it was 3 years of, not knowing, which when we finally got that diagnosis and finally got to the right specialist, it was, a lot better. But there was a phrase that I shared with him. And I said, if this condition's going to beat me, it better bring a lunch, because I'm going to give it hell the entire day in therapy. You know what? It better bring a dinner too, because I'm not going to give up. And I think when it comes to whatever like goal you have, like if this is going to beat me, it better bring a lunch, because I'm not going to give up that easy. Like I'm going to give it a fight. And I think as long as you have that fighting spirit, you have to have hope for something. If you don't have hope for anything, like you're going to fail, and you're not going to keep going, because it is going to get hard. When you lose everything and you don't have anything to go to, my two outlets before was work and exercise. Well, could not work and could not exercise, and was in a power chair with a helmet and oxygen strapped to my nose. So what do I do to escape my reality? I can't escape. You have to kind of hope for something. You have to give yourself a reason. And the other part I would say is to get through this whole process like this, I think we become so focused on like our job and, our house, our car, all the materialistic things. But when it comes to something like this, all of those things are taken from you. I mean, you can't do anything about it. It's not a matter of how hard you've worked. But something that can be never taken from you is your character, your integrity, your attitude. Those are things that lay the foundations for everything else in your life. If you have good integrity, if your character is good, if you have a good attitude, you're probably going to be a good partner. You're probably going to be a good coworker. You're probably going to be a good teammate. And that's all, a foundation that can never be taken from you. If you focus on your character of no matter what happens, I'm going to choose to be better. I'm never going to be bitter. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to be an overcomer. And then shift your mindset from like what's in front of you to what's going to be next. Instead of the problem, I focus on the solution. When you get into a parking lot, you get to a speed bump. You remember the first time you started driving, you're like, how do I get over a speed bump? This is a little freaky, right? Now you don't even think about it. But if you focus on what's in front of you, focus on the solution so that you can just go over those speed bumps like they're nothing.
No, it's great. I agree with that 100%. Leave us with a quote other than the one that you mentioned before, something that resonated with you in your life. What would it be and why?
I like Aristotle's quote about doing all things in excellence. So always reaching for excellence, always reaching to do your best, even doing all things in excellence. So let's go with that one.
Do all things in excellence. That's Aristotle's quote. I had to summarize kind of what we talked about and some of the key takeaways in this conversation. What do you think they would be?
Obviously, never give up, keep showing up, focus on solutions, on our problems, and keep a good attitude no matter how it feels. If you start reaching towards something bad, you're going to find bad. But if you reach for gold, you're going to find gold.
I love that. And then lastly, where can they follow you? Where can they get to know you? Where can they learn more about your story and follow your journey?
So I'm trying to be better about posting on social media. So I had Instagram for a while. They took a break from it, but I'm back on Instagram now, and I'm posting, reels, which are kind of foreign to me, but they're fun, right? We have a nonprofit called Positive Working Dogs. So we take rescue dogs. We're different than other nonprofits because we actually rescue dogs instead of breeding our own. PositiveWorkingDogs.org. It's spelled PAW, like a dog paw. That's on Instagram. So she's Melody Nicole _14. I have a Facebook too, but I kind of have it hidden, so I should probably put that public. But yeah, I'll probably put more on there. Been really focused on just building and not so much social media lately. So,
and then if you can take us into like your Ironman preparation and what you're doing for that.
Because I know myself now, I will run my body into the ground. And I grew up as a trainer, could totally train myself, but I would like probably run 30 miles on a weekend if it was up to me. And I find that stuff fun. I know that's like my friends think I'm crazy for it. So I actually have a PT working with me. He does strength training with me, and I have a swim coach. I typically do something every day for training. it's kind of hard to balance with my schedule now. Had to kind of take a little bit of a backseat with modeling since school's starting, and I've had to kind of prioritize training. The closer I get to my race date, the higher my rides get. So I was looking at one of my bike rides, and it's like 7 hours long. I'm like, what
Wow.
am I going to do on a bike for 7 hours? So I'm definitely not doing an indoor trainer, but I follow Tridot. It kind of just puts everything on my watch for me. I just hit go. I strength train, and I've been eating like 10 times more than I normally eat. I'm like, this is just insane. Like, I'm getting muscle again, which is exciting. I do actually answer some like calls and emails when I'm on my bike indoors because I don't have enough free time, but it's new for me. I've never done an Ironman before. I'm terrified. The swim part is, probably the scariest for me, but everything else I know I'll be fine with.
And then when is your big event?
I have the full in November, and then I crazy enough to do another Ironman within a month in Florida. And the only reason
Wow.
I'm doing it is because it's the accident anniversary for me. And every year I do something to kind of, prove like Melody 1, dysautonomia 0. So each year on my accident anniversary, I've done photos of where I'm at in the present moment instead of reliving the trauma of what happened to me. I live in where I'm at now and how grateful I am to be alive now. Yeah, this one's going to be epic. So I'm going to be in Florida doing an Ironman on my accident anniversary. So really
I
excited
love
about
that.
it.
Love that. Well, we'll be here cheering you on, and I really appreciate you taking the time and loved hearing your story and can't wait to share it with the audience. So thank you for taking the time, Melody. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, have a great day.
You
Take
too.
care.
Bye.
Bye bye.